recording.
I'm on like 4 hours of sleep.
Hey, yeah.
Yep.
Not much more here.
Mm.
Okay, now we're recording. We are live.
This is Literary Roadhouse. One short story once a week. I'm Rammy.
I'm Gerald.
I'm Anais.
And I'm Maya.
Alright, so this week's story is called Snows of Kilimanjaro by Ernest Hemingway. And this story is about a man who went on safari in Africa with his wealthy wife. And while on safari, he cut his leg and the cut got infected. Their truck broke down and they're stranded. And as they wait for help to arrive, the gangrene gets worse. And the man starts reflecting on his life as he realizes that soon he is going to die.
Wow.
Good summary.
Very good summary.
So let's start at the top level where we always start.
Summary.
So how did you guys feel about this story?
I'm smiling.
Gerald, why don't you go first?
How did I feel about this story? Let me think now.
Were you imitating me and Annie's? Like your voice?
No, I wasn't. No, I was just pretending.
Oh, I forgot to mention in the story that the man is a former writer. So maybe that resonates with some of you also.
Oh, yes.
Or always writer. I don't know about former. I feel like his struggle is real.
He's a writer who stopped writing. How about that?
Yeah.
He's a troubled man. So, Gerald, tell us all the reasons why you're smiling today.
Because I love Hemingway's writing. I love it. It's quite brutal in parts. It's quite harsh, but I don't know. It's just. How do you tell? If you say
it's called a man crush.
If you say, and someone says, "Well, why do you love them?" And well, I just do. Okay, move on.
Gerald, you're adorable. Okay, coming into this story, I was a little trepidatious because the previous story that we read by Hemingway was the only story I've ever read by Hemingway. It was The Old Man on the Bridge, and I really did not care for that story at all. And I'd heard that Hemingway is really sexist and those female characters, yada yada. I love the story. I really, really love this story. As I finished it, I was like, okay, now I get Gerald's man crush. Now it makes sense.
I should just not say anything this week. I'll just sit here with a big smug grin on my face.
There's just something quintessentially masculine about it. I mean, it definitely illuminated why all my relationships go bad because I date these kind of manly men. I'm just like, come on. And I could see the issues with the female characters, which I'm sure we're going to get into later. But just the story, the language, I really, really appreciated it.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as Maya in that I had read Hemingway novels, but short stories. The last one we read was the only short story I had read by him, and I remember being kind of disappointed. Not this time. This was absolutely fantastic. I loved it. So, Gerald, fanboydom redeemed.
Wow.
Definitely, I loved it. But I will say it's funny because Maya said that this is the kind of guys that she's dated, and it's like not the kind of guy I dated, and it's like, this is why. It's like very validating for me to avoid these men at all costs.
Yes, it explains all my relationship issues.
And I'm like, dodging this bullet forever.
Metrosexuals for the win.
This is very surprising. I think I might have
You've dated these kind of men?
Reaction out of all of you. And I'm the one who suggested the story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What did you expect? Did you think we were all going to hate it?
No, I thought maybe mixed reactions like it usually is, but
nice. How did you feel about it, Rammy?
Yeah, I thought, I don't know if we want to get into the nitty gritty, but I felt that the italic, like internal dialogues and memories and stuff, I think that went on for a little too long, and just having to read that much italicized text was just hard on the eyes. But it kind of just felt like he was free writing, and it wasn't. It was just like, you know. And I get maybe he's trying to replicate like how someone would have like an inner dialogue with himself or thinking back. But I kind of zoned out a little because it just felt like the sentences were like running on into each other in certain parts. Some of them it was pretty entertaining and good, like when he was talking about his experiences with the wars and stuff. But then at other times it was just like throwing me off a little bit, I think.
You know, it's interesting you say that because that's those sections, the stream of consciousness. I love stream of consciousness, but I really wish there was a better way to punctuate it. Because italics can be difficult to read. And I mean, I'm just sitting here trying to imagine reading Faulkner all in italics. It's just like not going to happen. But I think the stream of conscious was done really well. And if you listen to the audio version, it's really, really artfully done. And that way you can read it without having to deal with the eyeballs and the italics. But yeah, I've read a lot of crappy stream of consciousness because I keep trying to write it. So, you know, it was nice to read how it's actually supposed to be written.
Yeah, I think those italicized bits were, to me, were the best bits. That I think I enjoyed them. I felt we were getting the real Hemingway through in those sections, and the craft of his writing really came out for me in those bits, and I just, you know, yeah, I what am I going to say? I just loved it.
Do you need a moment, Gerald? Give me a moment to yourself.
Should we leave you alone in a room with the story?
Yeah.
But I know what you mean, because there's a lot of lines that I didn't just highlight, I wrote them down because they really resonated with me, and they were all in those sections where there's all these descriptions, which are lovely and simple and very Hemingway, right? And there's all these sort of simple descriptions. He's, you know, going along, suddenly there's just this like really profound, just astute line just thrown in there, and then back to descriptions and moving along. And I'm just like, I love the way he did that.
Another thing I really enjoyed about the story was how his thought processes were changing as he was dying, which is something that we found in the Jack London story, with the guy that was dying from, you know, trying to build a fire. How to Build a Fire, I think that was the name of the story. It's been a while. Yeah,
Build a fire.
but
yeah.
the way you know, he became irritable and he would argue, and then he would fade back into memories, and then one memory would lead to another memory. I felt like those were all really true to how the brain would work, both as you're losing your faculties and as you're accepting that you're going to die, and you start like having that lifetime review thing going on. I thought that was really well done, and it wasn't cheesy, which is good and difficult because this is an older story, and those are things that we've seen done lots and lots of times since the story. And a lot of times when you read the mama of a style after you've read all the children of the style, you know, it can feel staid, and but it didn't. It still felt really fresh.
Yeah. And I was also, so the bits that were pure dialogue, I was surprised at how well it worked. It's kind of hard to do that because he didn't always say who was saying what. And it's very quick. It's very easy, I think, for dialogue to feel kind of forced or like no one really talks that way. And this one felt very natural for the time, right? Like, I don't think people in 2016 necessarily talk this way, but you could feel the time and who they are, her class, his class, their relationship, just purely through dialogue, which I thought was well done as well.
The voices were just very distinct. There was no point where you could mix up who's talking. You didn't need tags for that because they're just such different people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you could also tell from the dialogue what sort of people they were. I thought he did that really well. You know, you could hear the voices of the two characters, and I love the fact it's just two characters. Yes, there's a servant milling around and the plain guy, but really, you know, I love these little tight two-handers. They're you don't need a huge cast of characters to tell a story.
Yeah.
The plane guy isn't real though, right? It was just like a fever dream before he died, some friend. Because I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. It was. I mean, there is a plane, but when he's seeing the plane, there is no plane.
Right.
Well, I wasn't sure if that was a dream before he died or that's what he saw after he died.
Or that's when he died, right? He's being carted away to a snowy.
I thought he died when the boys were lifting his cot. And then he said, and the pain stopped. And maybe at that point he died. And then it jumps to the next morning. He woke up and the rescue plane came. So I'm thinking maybe all of this is like some fantasy, like after death that happens. Or something.
Yeah, it really could be. I think that's something that we're only going to really have an answer if we know more about Hemingway. You know, if he was a religious man, if he believed in an afterlife, those kinds of questions might lend some insight into how he would have written that. I really couldn't tell. I felt like as he was being lifted away and when he saw that that's where he was going to end up, I felt like that's when he died. But I can definitely see how you could read that as he died prior to that.
I read it like Rammy read it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole thing and then I woke up, especially, it's actually funny because when it was like, oh, Compton comes, I'm like, what are the chances that you like know the guy who just randomly flies over? And then he's like, it's the Pussy Moth. I'm like, who cares about this plane name? And then it's like, oh, makes sense. So that was also very satisfying for me as a reader.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they knew the plane guy because they were waiting for the plane, weren't they? So I think they were expecting the plane to come. So they would have known. And probably the guy who took him out there to start with, perhaps. Yeah,
because when you go on a safari in Kilimanjaro, you're renting a plane. You're typically renting some guides, you know, and you're out there for a while, and so you would know who's coming to pick you up.
Okay.
You know, the only question is why didn't they come and pick them up sooner? Well, because they're stuck out there. It's snowing, and this is 1930 something. It might have taken a while to get the message. Like now you'd have sat phones.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure sat phones weren't around in 34 or whatever. So, yeah.
I don't think it was snowing on them while they were there, though. I think it was fine. It was just infection.
Yeah, yay. Die from a thorn prick. You die because you're an idiot, because you don't put any medicine on it, because you're a stubborn man who's just fine. It's just a prick.
It got me very interested in gangrene. I was looking it up, and now I have a cut on my finger. I'm going to make sure to disinfect it.
We can all have something
paranoid now.
Anyway, can't we?
Every time you get a bruise, he's going to be at the ER. Do I have gangrene?
I read it in the story.
But the manner of his death, I think, is perfect. That's exactly what he deserves.
Yeah, exactly. That's what happens when you're a big man who doesn't need to take care of your little itsy bitsy print pricks.
Yeah, and he's such a jerk. Like,
but is he not? He is a jerk, but also it's accented because he's dying. So he is a jerk, but normally he would keep most of that under wraps.
Yeah,
he's
okay.
aware of it, though. It's
yeah,
not
he's
like
aware
someone
of it.
who goes on and just thinks he's the bomb. Like, he knows that he's...
He knows he's made his life from being with rich women. And, I mean, that's a jerkish thing to do. But at the same time, there were points where, you know, when he says, I love you more than anything else. And the next line is, you know, Pete's the lie that is made his living, you know, but that facade is starting to crack because he's dying and because he's sick, and so he's just like lashing out like a dog. You're seeing what's really underneath the surface.
I wonder whether some of this was autobiographical. I meant to check because there are a lot of things that I'm sure Hemingway did that. I'm sure Hemingway was there, and maybe that it's fairly autobiographical.
Well, I mean, we're writers. I mean, that's what happens. We take our life experiences and we use little grains of truth and we create fiction from them. Just because, you know, he hunts, just because he was a manly man who probably went through too many women, doesn't mean that this was autobiographical.
Well, in the editor's note in the beginning, they do comment that his fear that his own acquaintances with rich people might harm his integrity as a writer becomes evident in this story.
Yeah. And that's something that I found extremely interesting. The idea that by being too complacent, that's what harms his writing.
And also, oh, go ahead.
And well, I was just going to say, it reminded me of the interview that we just recently did with Karam Bajash, where he was talking about, working 4 years and then going on an adventure for a year just to shake things up so that you can write. And, coming into the story, all of a sudden, it just seemed really like prescient to thoughts I was already having about having to be adventurous and having to see all sorts of life in order to write. And so here he is, he's been with these rich women and he's getting really comfortable. And that's the thing that harms him and makes him unable to write.
Yeah, there are. I just did a quick Google search and one place, autobiographical elements in Snows of Kilimanjaro. And yes, he did marry a rich wife in Paris in 1927. And,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of there's a book, The Paris Wife, written about, and I think there are some other bits in there as well. I should look that up later.
What also I liked about it is that he does not paint the man like the man's painted in a really honest way. There's no holds barred on him. We get to see him warts and all, and I appreciate that. Whereas I was expecting, because of the stereotype of Hemingway, that he was going to be a manly man and he was right and the woman was wrong or whatever, but it really wasn't. And I felt like he was a fully fleshed, rounded out person who was very, very interesting and complex. Now the woman, on the other hand, we'll get to her later, but I enjoyed how he was written.
Yeah, I think so. I think because of the thing at the back of my head about the autobiographical bits, I thought it was very honest and very open about the man's flaws, and the Hemingway knew this character was mistreating women, and didn't have a very high regard for them, and I think that applied to him too. So I think he recognizes that even if it's not autobiographical, I think he recognizes a lot of himself in this particular character.
Definitely. Okay, Anais is trying to get in, and it looks like she's failing. Let me see if she's said anything in Slack. And of course, this is on the day that poor Rammy has to get out of here on time.
That's all right. I mean, we can talk.
Yeah,
Okay.
I get the feeling it's not going to be a long discussion this week.
Well, I would like to talk a little bit about this woman. I loved her dialogue and how she interacted with him and her exasperation. But, oh my God, her lack of character. Like, I really didn't get a feel for who she was, why she was with him. Yes, she had like some tragedies. Her husband died, a kid died. Like, I get that. But why would she keep him?
Well, you have to keep in mind that this is a secondary character, and the story just focusing on the man is already almost 10,000 words, around 9,400.
I don't need a whole lot. I just need her to be a fully fleshed out human being. You can do that in 3 sentences. She did not feel like a full human being, is what I'm saying. She felt very she felt like he felt human, and she felt like an archetype.
Yeah. Well, I think also by focusing in such depth on a singular character, that kind of makes everyone else marginal. I don't think it's intentionally trying to. I don't know.
From what I understand, this is a common problem.
All right, let's reverse it. I would think to myself, if the woman was the one who was dying and thinking back and all this stuff, like, and she can have a man who's like you know, doting and obsessing about her and stuff like that and wanting her to feel better. So I don't think I would take that any differently than this.
Oh, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, okay, Hemingway has a reputation for writing really bad female characters, for having them be very cookie cutter, very stereotypical, just not very interesting. Here is a super interesting guy. Like, he was a writer. He takes her and teaches her how to hunt. I love the fact that she hunts well and that she wants to do all the things that he wants to do. Like, that says something about her. But I felt like there was something about their interactions that didn't ring true to me, and I think that was because she didn't feel like a full human being to me. And that can be done in a very short number of words. It's not something that I need like her full background on. It was just the way she was written. She didn't feel like a fully fleshed human being. Now, I don't know if this is because Hemingway wasn't all that interested in women in that way, but I had issues with her. Like, every time she would come in, she would annoy me. And I was like, also, if you were that rich and you were so smart and you learn how to hunt and everything else, why would you keep this jerk?
Well, he kind of explained it, though. You did have some biographical information about her.
She had dead kids.
She was widowed fairly early in her life. She tried different things sort of as an outlet and finally decided on lovers. Her son died in a plane crash that kind of changed her party lifestyle, and then she decided that she wanted to settle with someone who she found interesting, which was this writer.
Yes, I get that. What I'm saying is her voice and her descriptions don't match that character history to me. Anais? Yeah. Do you understand what I'm saying?
No, I do understand what you're saying. I think it was strongest for me the first third of the story, where I was just like, poorly drawn women characters again. But I forgave because it was like the 30s. Like, who does that? It was kind of like the times. But as it went on and as we got her background, I was sort of filling in the blanks that weren't necessarily there. Like, I was like, I can see how a woman who, although she is very wealthy and she's strong and she has gone through a lot of things, still she's existing in a time where it's kind of like her self-worth is still a little bit wrapped up in who she's with, and she wants to be with a guy that appears to mean something. So I was kind of, from what I understand of like what being a woman is over time and how it was at that time, filling in those blanks. But I almost feel like, because you're not in her point of view, because I don't think maybe Hemingway could have done her point of view, but if it would have been written in her point of view, I think you'd see her snarking about him all the time in her head. Like, I
feel like she's gone through so much, and even as a woman who's with a man for those reasons, I feel like so much could have been done with her dialogue to have rounded her out more as a character, so that we would have understood that dynamic a little more. Because I feel, given her backstory that the narrator gives, she should be a really interesting and powerful woman.
I think I agree with. I know what you're saying is that it's almost as if her biography is dropped in to answer the question that you or a reader would come up with: why is this rich woman with this jerk? And bump bump bump. That's why she's with him. But having dropped that in as just a blurb of nation, she was, her dialogue was pretty cardboard. It was pretty, it wasn't. It was more of a foil to him, and he was, he was. Yeah, it was written close third person, so we know all about him and what he feels, and it's all about him, and she's just this foil, interesting foil, but it's not. It would have been better, I think, with more of her, just a drop into her point of view for a couple of paragraphs or something, so that we see her snarking about him, or see her commenting or thinking about him, or something like that.
No,
Or
I
even
don't
just
think
picking up
so.
something a little too, dropping something a little too hard, or
Yeah,
coaching him a little
frustration,
too
pushback.
more.
Mm.
It's
Well,
not so much that
okay,
I needed her point of view. I didn't, because this is
yeah.
his story. It's his point of view. I actually didn't need her point of view, but I needed her dialogue to match her backstory, the type of person that she is. I felt like there was a mismatch, and it was like, okay, yeah, she's really interesting and she's with him for this particular reason, but I'm still going to write her dialogue really cardboard and uninteresting.
All right, let me give you my thoughts on this dialogue, because yes, I agree that with such societally influential and prominent woman, you would expect something more to the dialogue to reflect that sort of personality. However, let's appreciate the context of the situation. This is your spouse on his or her deathbed, right? I think the presidents would crumble to their knees, and just be very subservient and wanting to
Exactly.
help
Your
out.
husband is dying on his deathbed, and you're going to be like, "Oh, come on, honey, have some soup. You'll feel better.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah,
don't
you're
be
doing
mean to
anything
me."
just to appease them, to make them feel comfortable and relaxed. Now's not the time for arguing or bickering or
But that's
anything
what
like
they're
that. You're just
doing. That's
very
what they're doing. They're
emotional.
arguing and they're bickering.
No, but it's like
Well,
trivial,
he is.
stupid stuff. It's not
Yeah.
like actually.
Well, but I mean, I hear what you're saying. I think if I'm hearing you correctly, it's that dialogue-wise, she might be more restrained. She may not push
Yes.
back because she feels, like she doesn't want to end this on a poor note because he could die at any moment now. So she doesn't want to say something she'll regret. But I think you could still show her like going to
That
make the
restraint
soup.
can be shown in the story.
It's physical. It can be physical. Like she may not say anything, but you can see her go and make the soup
Okay.
and she tenses up and you see her force herself to relax. So you can still kind of have that, you know.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
Listen to Rammy sticking up for Hemingway.
Yeah,
Girls are
I love it.
something on the side.
Go
No,
back.
I could see that if he put a little more descriptions of her being restrained. I give you that.
Yeah, he's
But
such a
frankly,
fool.
that's the only issue with the entire story is her. I have no issues with the rest of the story. I
I'm
love this
thinking
story.
also how much of that is due to your knowledge about the background of Hemingway and his descriptions of female
Frankly,
characters, 'cause I
this
didn't
would have
know that.
irritated me if I hadn't have known anything about him, because there were plenty of writers in his time that were writing great female characters. I've read some of those books older than that have great female characters. There was no excuse for him to have such a cookie cutter character, because when I came into the story, I wasn't expecting to like it, and within the first paragraph I loved it. So then I was like, I threw away all my preconceived notions. I was like, oh wow, this is really good, because I was expecting it to be old man on the bridge again, and I was like, oh god, here we go, it's gonna just be lame and annoying and too many periods and not enough commas. And then we get into the story, and within a paragraph I was all in. I was like, this is a great story. And then about halfway through, I noticed every time she spoke, I got irritated.
Yeah. Well, just because we're like halfway through, and I think we do a huge disservice if we don't get into his icebergs. / I really want to talk about how, even though the narrator never comes out and says like, I'm a fraud, the fraud theme, there's so many subplots, but the fraud one was probably my favorite one. He had that one line that was, let me see if I can find it. I wrote down so many. Oh, it was never what he had done, but always what he could do. Like the things that he was kind of obsessed with or that he valued in himself. And that line, I think, really resonated for me. Probably resonates with a lot of writers, where it's like the amazing thing I'm one day going to write, and then you never do.
Yeah, this writer was definitely suffering from imposter syndrome. And the description of that was just, not only was it classic, but it was really, really honest and well done. And I think it's something you can only write if you'd experienced it. Everyone thinks you're great, and you're just like, no, I'm not. This is all, and everyone's going to figure it out, and I'm just going to not be good at anything and let everybody down. Like that whole fear cycle is really, really good. I love that.
Because on that website I quickly found a little while ago, and the first thing it said is that Hemingway was suffering from bad reviews of some of his other work when he wrote this. So he
The Old Man on the Bridge, by chance?
No, it's not.
Get out the cat paws.
That's it, there we go. maybe a few too many periods, maybe not enough commas. I'm going to write that one down.
You love that start, didn't you, Gerald?
Hey, it was a spear into my heart. That was too many periods. Anyway, move on.
So many mutters.
Yeah. And keeping with the imposter syndrome, I also liked when he had the kind of visual, the metaphor where he was talking about how he wanted that in some way he could work the fat off his soul. All of that is sort of wrapped up in that same, like, I'm not as great as people seem to think I am.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. I never got a sense that he was very accomplished to begin with. I don't know. I think the woman was more attracted to his lifestyle and his personality than his work or his collection of writings or something. Because I didn't think it was so much like imposter syndrome as it was just regretting the things that you never followed through with.
Well, I think that he had to have followed through at least somewhat, because that's one of the reasons why she kept him. She was proud to have this writer. Like, he's essentially her pet. She likes him because he does adventurous stuff. He's good in bed, and he's a writer, and he's smart. Yeah, I can get all that. So obviously he'd written something.
Wait, I don't want to imply that he's written nothing, but it's not necessarily like renowned works.
Plus, I think in order to get imposter syndrome, you don't have to be publicly renowned or widely renowned. Sometimes just the expectations that your closest friends and family have of you is enough, because I've experienced that. Where, like, I'll never forget this one time, it was like a few years ago, and I'm like talking to my brother or whatever, and he like says something super flattering about me, about how like he doesn't worry about me because my work ethic's so great, this and that. And as he's saying this, I'm like binge watching Supernatural and eating mac and cheese straight out of a pot. Like, imposter syndrome acute right at this moment. Like, oh. Yeah, I'm like, oh, okay. So I think it's possible to feel that even if you're not like globally recognized.
Yeah,
and I think being with her, maybe some of his anger towards her has to do with, really, it's about him. Like, he is living, he feels he is coming up short against the image that she has of him.
Yeah.
Well,
and also I think that
shortcomings on other people.
True. I also think that he's taking it out on her because before he started dating rich women, he had real loves and he had ruined them by being a jerk. And he lived in areas where he knew people. As he said, he knew them because they were poor. He had this other life where he was a lot more involved with the people around him. He was much more connected. And I think he enjoyed life more back then. And so then he's dated this string of rich women, letting them get progressively richer and richer until he ends up with this one woman. And this has been a very boring life for him. And so where's the fuel for the writing if all the interesting people and interesting experiences are gone? And I think that that's where a lot of that regret is coming from.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think looking back on his life and recognizing that this string of rich women just are happy to provide for him and provide, if you like, experiences for his later life, but they're not the experiences that he wants and that charge his writing. The real experiences are sort of found in the poorer areas, and you can tell that in Hemingway's writing with the bits in italics, where I think you really get to know the character, and he's not just this leg dropping off, snarky, and miserable guy that's dying, but he's seen a lot of life and he's experienced a lot.
Yeah. When you said snarky, I also thought of did you guys catch the diss at F. Scott Fitzgerald? Like Hemingway just like punching over at his contemporary?
I missed that.
Oh, when he talks about, that writer Julian who loves to write about rich people, and he wrote, "The very rich are different from you and me." That's a famous F. Scott Fitzgerald quote.
Oh, why did I not
He
make
named-
that connection?
Oh,
That's
wow.
hysterical.
He named him Julian, but it's the same line. And it's his contemporary, and they famously had a rivalry and were two of the writers in Paris, so they,
Wow.
interacted together. I'm like, oh, look at that.
Kenny, so smart.
Well
Nice
spotted.
catch.
Well spotted.
Uh,
So is there anything else about the story that we wanted to touch on before we go ahead and rate it?
well,
Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say that the fact that he was a very unlikable character and yet I kept reading also speaks to Hemingway's skill. And I think part of it is the close third person with him. Like, as you see his background, as you see his self-awareness, as you see him fighting with himself to not be a prick, you're a little bit, you're more willing to forgive him. I'm not going to say that I cared like one way or the other, whether or not he died or lived. Like, I didn't, not that I was rooting for him to die. I think in To Build a Fire, I was like, just die already to the character. In this case, I didn't have that feeling. But I didn't hate him, even though he's someone you could easily hate.
Yeah, I actually felt a little bad when he died because I felt like having that close brush of death and laying there thinking about all the mistakes that he'd made and the ways that he could have done things differently. If he had lived, maybe he would have turned his life around. And so I felt a little sad he didn't get an opportunity to do that. Gerald shaking his head no. He's like, no, men like that don't change. Old dogs and all that.
Once a prick, always a prick.
I was not expecting that quote.
I was quoting Anais.
Sure.
Oh.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Rammy, before I cut in with the...
Everything was good. Of course, I do have some contentions with some of the more explicit scenes, but
What explicit scene?
as always,
The
I
Armenian
didn't-
woman?
I don't
and then
understand.
he goes around like, I think he described the body and actions like in a little too much detail for my liking.
What detail?
All he said was
I
that,
honestly don't know what he's
Repeat the
talking about.
words.
okay, I guess she has a big butt because he describes it as you don't need to put a pillow beneath her hips. Okay, that's not raunchy.
Oh, and then he was talking about the way, the hips and all that stuff.
All that stuff? What stuff? We literally don't know what you're talking about, Rammy. And he's pull
Just
open the
reread
story
the
and,
part.
and try to figure out what.
I know what he's talking about. It's the Armenian woman with the belt that rubs up against him and he feels scalding hot.
Yeah, that wasn't explicit. How in the world did you get through Dilera?
That's why I was saying it was torturous, and you insisted that I read it.
And did anybody record it? Because I would have loved to have seen you trying to read that story. I would pay for that tape.
Actually, how did you read that story? Because I finished it by screaming it out loud. That was the only way.
Okay.
Sorry, Rammy.
Just,
We're over.
like head shakes, just how people go SMH, just like that. That's how it's reading.
I'm tempted to read this, and this would still get a clean rating.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's not.
Yeah.
Not from Rammy, it wouldn't.
Different standards.
Exactly.
Oh man. I'm sorry, I have no words. I love you, Rammy. Love you. Okay, are we ready to rate this?
Yeah, just
'Cause I
one
hear
more
the
joke.
little-
Yeah. Just for the people who didn't read this, there's one fantastic joke where he's missing his wife, the only woman he truly loved, and he writes to her about how much he misses her and wants her to come back and thinks about her, and she writes back basically like a 1938 version of "Who's this?" It was amazing. Yeah, what was this? She wrote back. It was like, "Who's the letter from, darling?"
Yep.
Wait,
Yeah, he burnt that bridge.
Time out, because I think I must have misread that then. because I thought he wrote, and then "Who's That, Darling" was what his current fling was saying, and then like he received the letter, and then the current person was saying "Who's that," but not that that's what it actually said in the letter.
Yeah.
No.
Because then him and his wife fought, and that was the end of that relationship.
Oh, I see. I thought it was a letter. I liked it the way I read it much better. I thought it was from the wife writing back.
Yeah, I kind of like it the way you read it better, but yeah, we were the three of us.
Because
one of these things belongs together.
Oh, I see. Because the line before talks about how he went home. The office sent the mail up to his flat. So I thought he was reading the mail alone. He was with someone at that point because he's running around with the Armenian.
He's with everyone.
Yeah, he was cheating.
This guy is the worst.
He was with somebody. He was running around with the Armenian.
He was whoring himself.
He was seeing prostitutes while he was missing his first wife. He was doing these things. He was acting out because the love of his life he'd ruined. He'd burnt that bridge, and so he was trying to fill that hole with all these other women, which is a really common thing to do. And unfortunately, and that's how I read it.
Yep. All right. Let's get to ratings.
Gerald, have you ever done that? Had a hole in your heart and filled it with many women?
No, I'll answer that for you. Of course not. How could you ever think such a thing? You're welcome. Let's get to rating though, because we're tight.
Yeah.
Okay. I rated a 5. It's getting 1 point off for uninteresting use of women.
Okay. Oh no.
Oh, where's she gone? I'll give it 5.5 for the same reason.
All right. For me, 4.5. For what I thought was a little too long with the stream of consciousness stuff and the love scenes, and I took into consideration what you brought up about the women as well.
Love scenes. I'm still confused on that. I didn't see any love scenes.
Let him
I'm sorry. Let's tease him while we wait for Anais to come back, because this is fun. How are we going to do the quiz without Anais?
We've done it with 2 before.
Okay.
Wait, what are your stories though?
1 second.
She'll pop in and she can say it once she's.
Yeah. Well, I'm going back to Carve magazine. Hooray!
Oh no, that's where I was gonna get mine.
That's okay.
It's all right. Doesn't matter. We're probably not going to win anyway.
Ouch!
My story is what splits
We'll
us.
see whose geography is better.
My story is What Splits Us by Mark Farrington.
What Splits Us by Mark Farrington. Okay, fine. You can have that one. I'm going with La Cuesta Encantada by Colette Sator.
All right. Anais still not in.
And that's how you know both me and Gerald were lazy. We just Carve picked the first.
Because I haven't been there for a while.
Sure.
Okay.
It's okay. I'll admit it. I was lazy because I've been over at Granta and I didn't think you guys wanted another Granta story.
I'll start off.
I'm really enjoying Granta. It's now my favorite magazine.
I'll start off with, all right, well, the topic of this week's game has to do with the title of the story. So it's going to be about mountains.
I knew he was going to do this. Why didn't I study mountains?
Yeah, you should have brushed up.
I totally knew this.
But we'll start off easy. I'll be kind. And then we'll get into a little more tougher questions, and then a tiebreaker if necessary, but I don't think it will be. All right. So let's start with Maya, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
In which country is Mount Fuji located? Japan, Indonesia, or South Korea?
Japan.
Correct. Gerald. And yeah, just get your confidence up. We're starting off simple. In which country?
Handing me the low-hanging fruit.
No, his as well. In which country is Mont Blanc located? Finland, Fiji, or France?
It's France.
Correct. I don't know. I have one for Anais, but should I skip it? Yeah, I'll skip it. All right.
Yeah.
So Maya, what is
Okay.
the longest mountain range in the world? Is it the Himalayas, the Rocky Mountains, or the Andes? Now we get a little tougher.
Andes.
Correct. Nice. All right. Gerald,
Yeah.
which of these mountains is also an active volcano? Is it Popocatépetl? Popocatépetl? I think that's how you pronounce it. In Mexico, Mauna Kea in Hawaii, or Popedo Peak in Kyrgyzstan or China?
The Hawaiian one.
What did you say?
The Hawaiian
He said
one.
Hawaiian.
No, it is Mexico.
Oh.
So are you going to give Anais 2 questions now
Yeah.
to catch her up?
Anais, thanks for joining us.
Hey, I got thunderstorms.
this-
I don't need that snark.
What story are you submitting?
The same as last week, The Wig by Hang Dong.
Okay.
All right, so Anais, the game is about mountains, so I'll give you your first round question and second round, since that's where we are now.
Mhm.
So the first one, in which country is Mount Kilimanjaro located? Zimbabwe, Kenya, or Tanzania?
Is this one of those trick ones where it's on the border? Isn't it Kenya?
Nope, it's
Tanzania and near
it
the
is on
border.
the border.
It is a trick one. Okay.
Okay, and then the second one, which is the highest peak in the Western Hemisphere? Is it Mount McKinley, Aconcagua, or Annapurna?
The second one?
Aconcagua?
Yeah.
Yes.
Andes.
All right.
Yep. Okay.
So round 3, Maya's in the lead. Gerald and Anais are tied for second place. Maya.
Uh-huh.
Mount Ararat, long thought to be the traditional resting place of Noah's Ark, is located where? Eastern Turkey, northern Afghanistan, or southern Europe?
Turkey.
Yes. Good job.
Don't say it.
Maya won.
Yeah, it looks like
All
you
those
did.
years
All
of watching Discovery
Anyway.
Channel.
Gerald,
Yep.
which of the following U.S. president's faces is not carved into Mount Rushmore? Is it Thomas Jefferson, Franklin Roosevelt, or Theodore Roosevelt?
Theodore Roosevelt.
Franklin.
Oh.
Close. It's tricky. And then the last one for Anais. Who were the first climbers known to have reached the top of Mount Everest in 1953? Was it Edmund Percival Hillary and Tenzing Norgay, George Mallory and Andrew Irvine, or Raymond Lambert and Shambhu Tamang?
The second set, Mallory and Irvine.
No, it was the first one.
Okay.
Edmund Percival Hillary and Tenzing Norgay.
Okay.
Hey, congrats, Maya.
Yay!
You did it.
So next week we will be reading La Cuesta Encantada by Colette Sartor.
Okay, but before you go, share your thoughts on death and this story at literaryroadhouse.com. And don't leave us stranded. Please send help by leaving a review on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spreaker. And if you want to go on a digital safari, you can hear hyenas laughing on our other podcasts, the Literary Roadhouse Book Club and the Bradbury Challenge. And if you love our grumpy banter, please support us on patreon.com/literary roadhouse. Every little bit really helps. And as always, share this podcast with your friends before the vultures get you. Until next time, read a good story.
Read a good story. And watch out for the hyenas, too.
Yeah. They're on our podcast.
Yeah, I couldn't hear any of it. It was blocked by a firewall. I'm all bummed I didn't get to experience her outro this week.
Oh,
Her outros
no.
are
You can
always
listen
so
to the
good.
recording.
I'll have to. You know,
All right,
I
see
can't
you
live without her
guys.
outros.
None of you can hear it?
Bye, Remy.
I heard it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it just showed up. Make sure your connection isn't blocked by your firewall. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the room for the other show, and we'll go ahead and get started.